We met some powers of 10 in the last video. Specifically, we looked at powers of 10 where the exponent is a whole number. But the exponent isn't always a whole number. It can be anything. In fact, it can be a fraction as well as a negative number. So we are interested here in negative integers like a -1, -2, etc., -3. So let's look at a power of 10 that has a -3 in the exponent. A power of 10 with a +3, as we saw in the last video, is simply 10 times 10 times 10. But when we try to do this repeated multiplication for this other power, it doesn't make any sense. How can I repeat a 10 -3 times? So we are going to have to change the interpretation of this expression. We're going to change it so that it has a +3, but we also have to change the base. We need to use the reciprocal of 10. Now, if you remember way back in elementary school, you studied reciprocals. Reciprocals are studied when you study fractions. Reciprocals. Two numbers are reciprocals of each other. If when you multiply them, like times b, gives you a 1. Okay? Now that happens when you have a number, let's say 2/3, and I want the reciprocal. All I have to simply do is invert it, put the 3 on top and the 2 on the bottom, and then these two numbers end up being reciprocals. They are reciprocals of each other. This is a 2/3 and this is 3/2. So the same thing happens with 10. 10 can be expressed as a fraction with a denominator of 1. The reciprocal of 10 over 1 is simply 1 over 10. So if I take my 10 here and I form its reciprocal, I will get 1/10. Now, if I use that as a base and I put 3 as a positive number, then I have the correct interpretation of what a negative exponent is. And I'm able to now evaluate because I can multiply 1/10 times 1/10 times 1/10. When I multiply these three fractions, I multiply numerator times numerator times numerator, giving me a 1. And denominator times denominator times denominator, giving me a 1,000. So I end up with a fraction. Some people call it a unit fraction. This fraction can be expressed in decimal form very easily. It takes 3 places after the decimal point and shows a 1 at the end. So I've got 2 zeros and a 1, and this is called 1,000. So it's this one. If you remember, this is your decimal form for this fraction. So in fact, a power of 10 with a negative exponent then is equal to a fraction. It's equal to a very small number, in fact. Let's look at some other negative powers. Powers of 10 with a negative exponent. Let's look at 10 to a -1. 10 to a -1 would be again 1/10, but this time raise it to a +1. So a number raised to a 1 is just simply equal to itself, 1/10. 1/10 in decimal notation would be 0.1. Let's look at 10 raised to the -2 power. Okay, it's a -2. I will have 1/10, and this will be raised to a positive 2 equals to 1/10 times 1/10, which gives me 1/100. 100 then equals to 0.01. Okay. We saw already 10 to the negative 3, so let's look now at 10 to the negative 4. So, negative 4, I might be able to skip these intermediate steps. I know will look like this. 0 point, a certain number of places, and then a 1 at the end. How many places? So, the negative 4 gives me an idea. The negative 4 would tell me that I need to have 4 places. I will put 3 zeros because those would take up 3 places, and then a 1. 10 to the negative 5, we'll have 5 zeros. 5 places. Places, not zeros. 5 places. But I will need 4 zeros because all I have for the numerator is a 1. So I will only have a 1, but I need 4 more places to occupy a total of 5 places. Then to the negative 6 would be 0.5 zeros this time and a 1. So counting the number of places to the right of the decimal point would tell me that it should be 6. Okay? So it would be the absolute value of the exponent. The absolute value of the negative 6 is just a positive 6. So I need to count 6 places. Alright, let's look at this. Negative 11. If you remember that the first sample problem of the CAHSEE exam showed one of the answers had a 10 to a negative 11. Okay, so what would this be? It would start with a 0, I would have a decimal point, and I need to have 11 places. So I'm going to put 10 zeros. 3, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the end one at the end. So a total of 11 places. Okay, now let me explain this in Spanish, because I haven't said a word in Spanish. Estamos hablando de las potencias del 10. En el último video vimos que había potencias del 10 positivo. El exponente, digamos, era positivo. Habíamos hablado de que cuando el exponente es positivo, solamente se repite la multiplicación de la base. Pero ahora estamos hablando de un exponente negativo. Y el exponente negativo no tiene el mismo significado, porque no podemos hablar de 3 veces negativas, por ejemplo. So, lo que tenemos que hacer es cambiar la base y cambiar el exponente. El exponente se cambia al positivo y la base se cambia al recíproco. ¿Qué son recíprocos? Recíprocos son números que al multiplicarse me da un 1. El recíproco de cualquier número es el número volteado al revés. El numerador se baja para abajo y el denominador se sube para arriba. So, para el 10 sobre 1, su recíproco sería 1 sobre 10. Aquí el recíproco sería 1 sobre 10 y esa sería la nueva base. Ok, subido al poder 3 nos daría 1/10 multiplicado por 1/10 por 1/10. Y al multiplicar esas 3 fracciones nos va a dar 1 sobre 1000. Ese se cambia a su forma decimal. En la forma decimal escribimos 0 punto y luego 3 lugares, 0, 0, 1. Nos pasamos ahora a ver otros poderes del 10 que tienen exponentes negativos, como la potencia del 10 al 1 negativo. Al 1 negativo entonces lo cambiamos a 1 positivo, pero tenemos que cambiar también la base. La base sería 1 sobre 10. 1 sobre 10 subido a la potencia 1 sería nada más un 1 sobre 10. Y ese viene siendo 1/10. Un décimo se escribe 0.1. 10 al poder 2 negativo nos daría un décimo subido al poder 2 positivo. Y ese nos daría 1 sobre 100. 1 sobre 100 nos da en forma decimal 0.01. Fíjense que ocupa dos lugares, que viene siendo como el valor absoluto del 2 negativo, que es un 2 nomás. Entonces quiere decir que el número de lugares que ocupa después del punto decimal debe de ser el 2. Y aquí debería de ser 4. Entonces le ponemos 0.0001. Aquí serían 5 lugares los que ocuparía el decimal. Ponemos 0, 4 ceros y un 1. Aquí serían 6 lugares. 6 lugares serían 5 ceros y un 1. Y para este ejemplo que vimos en el CAHSEE, en los ejemplos del CAHSEE, entonces aquí también pondremos un 0, un punto, y habría que poner 11 lugares. 11 lugares serían 10 ceros y un 1. ¿Ok? Aquí vamos a terminar este video y vamos a pasarnos luego a discutir el scientific notation en el próximo video. I am aware that the explanation I gave you about negative exponents is not very satisfying. That's because I didn't show you why we use the reciprocal instead of the base. We will do that when we get to a much deeper discussion on exponents. When we talk about the laws of exponent, I think you will be fairly satisfied as to why this happens. For now, just memorize the fact that you have to use the reciprocals when you are talking about negative exponents. In the next video, we're going to talk about scientific notation. Ok, acabo de mencionar que la explicación que les di del exponente negativo no es muy satisfactorio, porque no explica muy bien por qué es que se usa el recíproco. Pero vamos a discutir eso con más detalle cuando hablemos de las potencias, de los exponentes, dispénsenme, las leyes de los exponentes, en otro video. Y mientras el próximo video vamos a hablar de scientific notation.